Welcome to Saddle Up Live, a transformative podcast tailored for women aged 40 and beyond, where courage, God's grace, and a touch of sass are the driving forces behind conquering life's challenges. Join me, Lesa, as I take you on a captivating ride through the multifaceted aspects of womanhood in this vibrant stage of life, covering everything from my journey through breast cancer, the intricacies of marriage, and the joys of motherhood, to the exciting adventures of grandparenting. Together, we will uncover actionable strategies for personal and professional development, providing you with the tools and inspiration needed to blaze new trails and seize every opportunity that comes your way, no matter what your age or stage. Welcome, listeners. I'm so thankful that you're here today. I have Olivia Atkin with me, and she's someone that's kind of new. You're a new person that popped up in my world, and I'm excited to get to know Olivia more for several reasons. One is she's got a podcast called Achieving Success. And Olivia, I did listen to some of that today, and I did really like it. You have some great guests on there. And so I would just tell my audience, if you're looking for some interesting stories, it's good life stuff too. I mean, it talks about business and growth, and I'm about that too. You know, even though I'm a little bit more probably on the mature side, I mean, it's still fun to grow and learn. And another thing that kind of drew me to you was you talk about having a voice. And Olivia, you're so young and you have a voice, and that's so awesome. But I think about, I am just starting to find my voice. And I don't know if it's common for women or not. I just know what I've gone through. And I know that I have kind of been maybe a little bit afraid, maybe wanting to people please, and haven't used my voice. So I want to talk about that a little bit today too. But before we get into all of that, Olivia, welcome, and please just share your story. Just tell us a little about you, what led you to do this work, and you're in New Jersey, which everyone's going to know when they hear your voice.
Yes. So one interesting fact I'll start with is I currently go between New Jersey and Juneau, Alaska.
Oh
So
my gosh.
we're currently, yes, which is an interesting story about owning your voice and your power in itself, because never thought, a girl born in the South, grew up in New Jersey, and then after college went back and lived in New Jersey. I never thought and refused to move out of the area. So Alaska was not even on my visiting list, let alone moving. But my boyfriend is a chief in the U.S. Coast Guard, and he got stationed here, so we are here. Do know Alaska, but it's a very fun journey. And let me tell you, when the time comes every few months that I could go back to Jersey, I'm like, yes.
Well, okay, so I didn't know that. I thought you were in New Jersey. So right now you're doing this recording from Alaska.
Yes. And I keep it New Jersey, like, for example, on LinkedIn, where we first connected, because typically there's stereotypes with Alaska in general, right? Oh, the 6 months darkness, 6 months lightness, there's no real civilization, which I'm not, there's some parts of that are true. There's some parts that aren't. But typically, just like in general, when people hear Alaska, they get preconceived notions on your own capabilities, what you could do, what you can't do. And I'm like, we're going to keep it to New Jersey, because the lower 48, everyone kind of knows. But yeah, so my story is I started my business, Achieving Success LLC, which has a book division, my podcast division, as well as podcast consulting. When I started my podcast, Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin, that launched November 1st, 2022. So we're 3 years in. It's been a wonderful journey. But for me, I'd written my book first, and that gets used at universities. I was teaching career development and speaking about career development and working at Lockheed Martin at the time. But to also give a little bit of backstory, I did not go to undergrad college saying I'm going to be in supply chain. I'm going to do this and that. I actually went, my undergrad degree is business management with a dual minor in sports studies and law. I was the youngest intern to ever intern at the New York Football Giants, and I
Wow.
worked in professional sports for 8 years. So if you would ask me, I always go back to like that young professional. If you'd asked me then, my career would always be in professional sports. And I was lucky enough that halfway through my college career, I had that opportunity and I was staying with the organization. So I didn't even need to worry about job or go like, I might not be able to work in this industry. But it got to a point where I was growing and I was working for them, managing professional athletes, and just going, there's pieces of this I really enjoy. There's pieces of this I enjoy, but and don't enjoy, but there's also pieces of this that when I look at my future, is this sustainable? And that's when I then, you know, transferred into and went back to school and got my MBA with the concentration in supply chain because all these different factors you get to work on in supply chain and the things I love. And by the time I graduated with my MBA and started working at Lockheed, I had a degree or certification in every business area. And the big thing I found was that when you're talking, especially to young professionals, they think what they go to college for, even by year 2 or 3, and they might not be in love with it, is what they have to stay in. And I'm like, that's not true. And if you talk to most people, they don't enter or graduate with a certain degree and specific the specificity of that industry or whatever it might be that they enter and stay that long term. We change as individuals. And that really needs to be what I think and why everything's called achieving success is because
Mhm.
success changes and it should change because the one constant in life is change. And so for me, doing my business and podcast is going wherever you are today, even if you're in the thick of it is okay and it's relatable and it's finding your footing, finding your voice, owning your story that will take all those moments of doubt, uncertainty, growth that you're having, and possibly even issues other people don't know about, and be able to become the victor of that and go, yes, this is where I am and I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Okay. I love this on so many levels. And I just have to say that I love that you say success changes because I really didn't start doing this work that I love until I was like 49 or 50. So I want my listeners to know that this is any stage of your life. And I want to talk more about that. And I do want to get more information on what you did in the sports world because that's just intriguing. And I can't help it, Olivia. I don't know if you even want to talk about Alaska, but you piqued my curiosity. And I have to ask because they have those shows like Living Alaska. And I never look down. I watch and I think, wow, what a beautiful, beautiful space to live in and how different is. And can you just, for a few minutes, shed a little light and tell me, is it dark for 6 months or not? Because I'm in Wisconsin. I feel like we're kind of close to Alaska, but you tell me.
Yeah, so I could debunk some myths, I could give you some insight. So I live in Juneau. So Juneau is the most southeast part of Alaska. It does not have 6 months of darkness and 6 months of lightness. It and I will go over the time span in a minute. I also want to highlight Juneau is technically a rainforest. So we don't get massive dumps of snow. It's actually, I'm pretty sure from something I've read when we moved here, it's the only rainforest in the US. I could be wrong. Could be right. So don't quote me on that. I'm just saying. But the way in this section of June of Alaska, the sunlight works is the longest month of the year is June, and it peaks at 18 hours of sunlight. We moved here in the end of June, and to give I an idea of what that was, about 3:30, 4 a.m. is sunrise, and sunsets at about 11 o'clock,
That's
maybe a
a
little
little
later.
crazy. Was that a little
Yeah,
crazy?
it was, especially moving here. So Juneau is also waterlocked, so the only way to get here is by boat. And they have a ferry cruise line for if you're getting to different parts of Juneau and from Seattle, as well as planes. So we got here on a boat because we had our truck and all of that. And we got off the boat because of some delays at 2 in the morning. So we got to our house we were moving into at 2:30. We're pumped. We do a quick walkthrough, completely dark. And then we're just talking like we're ants walking through everything. And all of a sudden I look at the window, I'm like, is the sun rising already? Like, what time is it? And I'm like, oh my God, it's 3:15 in the morning. Like, what is happening? Where the craziness really lies, you have to be careful with that, because we moved here again as part of the Coast Guard. So we packed a lot of stuff in our truck, but like our bedding and stuff, obviously the Coast Guard moved. So we were sleeping in the living room on our guest furniture we had bought when we were here. And we have a lot of windows. So you were getting, I'm a light sleeper. That sun's coming in at 4 in the morning. I'm waking up thinking it's 7, 8, that
Mhm.
Northeast time, that 8 a.m. Like the day's going. Where it also gets confusing and plays with you is we all have that time where it's like, okay, it's getting darker, days winding down. And when it's bright sun at 9:30 at night and you're, working through the day and you look at the time and realize what time it is, or you're sitting watching TV going, okay, I can watch TV for a little longer. It's not that late. And you're like, it's 11 o'clock. Knowing that in a few hours, yeah, it's getting
Yeah.
dark now, but in a few hours it's going to be light again. That's where it gets hard. The other aspect is, let's do the flip side. So the shortest month of the year is December. The shortest day, to give you some comparison, as we just lived through this for the first time, the sunrise was 8:30. It might have gotten up to like 8:45 being the latest. Sunset was the shortest day, 3:08 p.m. So you're not even done your day. It's a 6 hour chain, 6 hours and like 48 minutes, I think is the shortest day. It might be a little less than that. You're not even done your work day and you're looking outside and it's, getting dark out. And so you have to mentally be prepared for that and get used to it, because if not, especially if you work at home, whatever your work environment, even if you don't, you're leaving the house in the dark and you're coming home in the dark, and that really can play on you. Also, being here as someone who grew up in an environment where you can drive 5 minutes and there's a Wawa in every corner. You got Target 10 minutes away. You have everything at your fingertips, right? And you can drive it. Where I grew up in Jersey, to give some example, you're 15 minutes from Philadelphia and the stadiums. You're not even 2 hours from New York City. You're an hour from Baltimore. You have the shores within 45 minutes. You could, there's so many things you could do. We have the smallest Costco in the world here. We have two other supermarkets. The only chain restaurants you have here are Papa John's, Subway, and McDonald's. Everything else is mom and pop. So when you want to get things, you can't just hop in the car and go. You can't just do things. That to me was honestly one of the most difficult things, because I like to have accessibility to things, whether it's resources, being able to go, oh, I need this. Let me go run out and get it. You can't run out and get it. Most of the time.
So do you order from Amazon?
I do. But here's the thing. Everything from Amazon comes from Seattle. And 99.9% of the time, the US Postal Service is going to be delivering that. So let's say you order something on Friday. Typically, it's good and it comes in 3 days. Sometimes it's a week. You have to kind of prepare for that, but they'll tell you. Um, but let's say you ordered on a Friday morning. Delivery 3 days out will be Sunday. You're not getting it on Sunday. The U.S.
Right.
Postal Service doesn't deliver on
Right.
Sunday. So there's those nuances. Um, and Juneau in Alaska is really for outdoor people if you're going to live here long term. The outdoor activities. The fishing's great. I've got into fishing. I'm not a big hiker. The snow's here, so we do still get snow in Juneau. Takes a little longer to gather. So like I have a ski lesson, like I do ski lessons now. Um, but there's a lot of pieces to it that you have to go in to with an open mind when it
Hmm.
comes to living in Alaska. Um, Being open to also helping others understand what it's like here, because not that anyone tries to have misconceptions about what it's like in Alaska, but some of the TV shows depict
Hmm.
things differently. There's one that Alaska has continuously, I forget the name off the top of my head, but sued and actually thrown the people
Oh,
in jail.
really?
Yeah, because they're misrepresenting Alaska so severely of like like what you could do hunting and survival wise, that they don't want that representation because it's not actually accurate. But those
Hmm.
are the things that sadly, doesn't showcase what it's like.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. And I can't, my mind goes to when we have our summertime here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'm right on the border. It's like your life is just so full and it stays sunny out and you feel so good and happy and you're so much more active. And you know, in the winter, like now, when you leave the house and it's dark and you come home and it's dark, even though it's not as it is where you are, I tend to be less active. I tend
Mhm.
to just kind of sit around. And so I just think I might be like a crazy woman if I lived in Alaska during that June month, because I'd be like, oh, let's go outside and play and do,
Oh
I
yeah,
can
I'm
only imagine.
I'm like that. So in the summer when we were here, I'm like, this is awesome. Like again, I've my boyfriend has been fishing his whole life. He grew up in Florida. I got into fishing when he was stationed in Florida. So like fishing was great, being in the water, like at 9 o'clock at night, watching the boats go by, like it's great. Um, but I'm mainly in the house now. So again, it's understanding between work and then it being dark and cold, like what you could be doing and keeping that in mind to not go stir crazy.
Yep, and I'm sure that, I mean, you just, when those summer months come, I feel like I don't even want to work. Just get me outside. And I'm sure it's even more so. So okay, thank you for for fulfilling my curious mind about Alaska. I love that. I love learning about that. And now I just want to ask a little bit more about your career with the Giants. Tell me about that a little bit, because that's interesting too.
So I got in with the Giants, and I always tell people the importance of networking and informational interviews. So a lot of people don't necessarily think of ever building long-term relationships or doing informational interviews. I reached out to the Giants when I wanted to work there as, hey, can I just do an informational interview? I'm not looking for a job. I don't, you know, obviously an internship would be nice, but I just want to learn about the industry. I just want to see what it's like. I want to, be able to get some of these questions. And through some conversations, that was able to happen. And then I built a relationship with, at the time, the general manager was Jerry Reese, his assistant. And I continuously just touched base with her and really just built that relationship up. And the following year, so it was almost a year, I was a sophomore. And I get, again, we're going email back and forth. She goes, I think there's a department still looking for an internship. And if they're not, I think the vice president of that department would be more than happy to do another, like an informational interview with him. So she does an introduction. He says to me, Olivia, why don't you come in and we'll have a meeting in person? We don't hire people your age. Typically, they've already graduated college, but we'll talk. So do that. That was during lunchtime, so a very interesting time because at the New York Giants, everyone eats together at the same time, including ownership. So you're sitting down for an interview, and Jerry Reese is coming in, the mayors are coming in, the players are coming in, and at the end of it, he goes, "You know what? Do you have your resume on you? Do you have your business card on you? There's a department I think I know is still looking for someone, and I think you would be a good fit in." Ended up that being player engagement. So I ended up getting hired by them. So I worked directly with the players. I did the rookie training camp, helped people do relocation, do all the different events, but really worked closely and made sure player engagement's the support staff to the
Mhm.
players' needs and making sure everything is, best it could be without getting into too many details. When my internship was up, which was going into my junior year of college, they actually offered me a job in the PR department. Because again, with at that time, my degree I was getting and my two minors, I could do stuff in HR, I could do stuff in legal, I can, do these different departments. And I built relationships with all the higher ups in those departments. And there were times where I would step in during training camp and help the legal department with like setting up the forms and the folders that the players would need and seeing different aspects of the business. And I looked at them like, I still need to finish my college degree. Like, I got to go back to school in a few weeks. I can't work here full time. I wanted to get that degree and finish, even though it was a great opportunity. And I also low key knew my parents would probably kill me if I went forward or dropping out of college because I got a job. And so they came back, the head of the PR department, the director at the time, and said, okay, well, what if you come and work our game day PR stuff and kind of be one, under him in the full-time role, like for the game day PR staff, you be the leader. I was like, I can do that. And that is where I sat for the most of my remaining time. If other issues or events came up, they needed support because of my relationships, no matter the departments, they would call me to do them. And then it just got to a point where there was no full-time availability to be hired. And I was getting older and I was just like, okay, this is great, but I'm about
Yeah.
to be off my parents' health insurance. I got to start figuring
Yeah.
this out. But I built, because of the positions I was in and really advocating and having conversations with the players, I built relationships with the players that during that time I was managing some of the day-to-day activities with the players, meaning their nonprofits. If they wanted to do a charity event, one of my players during the time that I managed when he got traded was starting a clothing line, and I oversaw the start to finish of doing that clothing line and approving designs and doing all that different things. That really led me that when I went into supply chain and then starting my business, to have the fundamentals to be able to talk about everything, understand things differently, because I worked in professional sports for that length of time and then went to supply chain, which is two very different industries.
Mhm.
um but it's all about the experiences I got over the time that I can leverage and have conversations about. And I was recently just on a call with a company that is a distribution platform for podcasts, and they are doing amazing things. And they are rolling out a system that should be way better for podcast hosts and monetization wise and this and that. And I got on the call and I'm like, okay, walk me through your process and procedure. Walk me through, how's this going to work? How's that going to work? We were on an hour call and they're like, wow, you're way more in depth wanting to make sure everything is actually good and we're being held accountable and like before taking the next step than the producers we've brought in house to see if they want to beta test it. And like, yeah, because all of this stuff is important. And if I'm not asked, I understand I need to ask it and what these questions are, but I also care enough to go, okay, how would this work?
Right. Well, and I think, okay, this is going to kind of simplify what you're saying. And it's something that I picked up that I just kind of want to share with the listeners, and I'm going to throw it out at you. But what you're kind of saying is that nothing is a waste. And so if you are spending your time in a career and you feel like you hate it, or wow, that was a waste of time, that's not true, because everything is leading you. So take every opportunity and everything in every area that you're in to learn and grow, because you never know where it's going to lead. And so, Olivia, so you agree with that? Does that sound right?
I 100% agree. And just, I know you have another question to just highlight that a step further.
Mm-hmm.
Is I started my business and left Lockheed Martin. Okay, so I'm no longer technically in the supply chain realm, though we all know supply chain isn't everything we do, right? And when I started my business, I stayed involved. At the time, I was the president of the Association of Supply Chain Management for the state of Connecticut. I stayed the president, and every year I've still been elected the president. I also was sitting on the international board for the supply chain management organization as a committee member. And every year they just kept asking me if I would be willing to stay. And the answer was yes. No matter whether it's that or something else, my friends have always asked me as a young professional, like, that's not having to do with your job today. Why would you do it? Right. And I said, because you never know when it's going to come in handy. You never know. Also, if you're trying to grow professionally wise, what that certification you get today might not be handy. It might just be extra knowledge that you have. Might be handy in 5 years from now. Well, in 5 years from now, when you need to take that certification to get that job promotion, and you have kids, and you have a life, and you haven't been out of school, trying to fit in taking that certification can be way harder to do.
Yeah.
But going back to that story, so I've been going to the conferences, speaking at the conferences the past 3 years. This past December, I decided to start an apparel company for the U.S. Coast Guard, for the men and women and their families who support us every single day. Something that they could just wear that's fun, right? And all of a sudden, all the stuff I had been sitting in meetings about and been listening about and keeping up to date played directly into what I was doing and the decisions I was making. And if I hadn't stayed active in those things, past experiences would still help. But I wouldn't have the same foundation and understanding and network that when that moment came up to be like, yes, I want to do this. And, you know, we're going to do this side, I call it, it's not a side business, it's an additional business, but we're going to go through with this. I knew all the people to talk to. I
Mm-hmm.
knew the people to consult with and make sure it got up and running. And I think that's a pure example of, even when it could seem like it might not be beneficial at all, something can happen where it all pivots.
Amen. And even, I mean, and not to be afraid to go back to those connections that you have and connect. It's because I think about people my age, sometimes that's tricky. You're like, oh, that was years ago. I haven't really been doing this. Everything that you just would be so surprised if you really look at it, the experiences and the connections that are going to mold you moving forward, if it's something you're thinking about. But Olivia, okay, so time is running out. I can't even believe this. But okay, so tell me, you do this great, successful podcast. You have an apparel company. Tell me, there's more. Did you say you wrote a book? I didn't know that. I thought I researched you.
There's a lot. There's a lot of different facets to me. Yes. So Achieving Success LLC has a book division, which has a textbook that gets sold in high schools and colleges on career development. So
Okay.
your resume building, cover letter building, but you can buy it online and on Amazon and all the platforms. So I do get people who buy that as a workbook tool that when they're ready to change their career, they have those resources. But I do a lot of obviously my podcast and then podcast consulting as well within my business. And that's a big chunk of what I do is working with people, getting them on the right podcast to share their voice and make that impact, or working alongside hosts to either build their podcast from scratch and make sure everything runs smoothly and work on those titles, descriptions, the whole gamut. Or if they already have that podcast, but they're not, play with words here, achieving the goals they've set
Mhm.
on why they've implemented that podcast. I come in, I help build that strategy out and then do the titles, the descriptions, the uploading to all the platforms, the coding in the background. Um, and again, like have meetings like I had before our recording today of, okay, if this is going to be optimized more for people in the industry, let's see how it works and break it down. And so I'm always doing research and finding out the information and then being able to manage that not just into the best tools for all of us in the podcast space, but also as a workflow system. So for my clients who are hosts, I very much oversee their workflow so they don't have to, if they have an editor, for example, go, hey, have you edited that episode? I got to check in with you tomorrow. Okay, have you edited
Right.
that episode? And then get it over to me and then get it to the next person. That gets taken care
So, I mean, in essence, what a great way to use your voice
of.
is in a podcast. And so, if anyone's interested in getting, in hiring you for that work, we'll have your information. What's the best way to find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn by searching Olivia Atkin or Achieving Success LLC. We have a Achieving Success page and my personal LinkedIn. I answer all the messages as well as my email, olivia.atkin@achieving-success.com. Again, might take me up to 48 hours. I try to warn everyone, but I do answer every single email
Wow.
myself. I like to make sure that people know, it is me. I will answer them. And then you could go to my website, achieving-success.com.
Awesome. And like I said, we'll have all that in the show notes. But Olivia, thank you for sharing all this information and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me on, and it was so enjoyable.
It's so fun. I love chatting. It's one of my favorite things. So it's been a pleasure. And I have a feeling I'm going to be talking to you more. So,
Hey, everyone. She will be on my podcast, so you can
yeah,
tune in and listen to both sides of the conversation.
exactly. Exactly. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Olivia.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another empowering episode of Saddle Up Live. As we conclude this exhilarating journey together, don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, and become a valued member of our vibrant community. Because, as always, every woman deserves to thrive, flourish, and live her best life. Until the next time, saddle up and keep conquering those trails.